Okay, then now I'd like to invite our next presenter, Mr. Kyle Andrew.
Hi, good morning. I will
Hi.
share my screen now.
Yes, please.
So, a pleasant morning to you all. Before anything else, I would like to thank the organizing committee of the 9th AMGS online conference for teen scientists and to all the mentors, co-mentees, and participants of this webinar. It is an honor to have the privilege of sharing my knowledge and work with such a distinguished audience. I am Kyle Andrew Abello, and I am a student of the Philippine Science High School Eastern Visayas campus. And today, I will be sharing with you my work entitled A Proposed Architecture for an Improved COVID-19 Tracing System localized in Tacloban City, Philippines. Proceeding to the abstract, we all know that COVID-19 has affected the whole world and different sectors, and contact tracing of individuals who tested positive for COVID-19 has been seen as an effective method in handling the pandemic in countries such as New Zealand, South Korea during the start of the pandemic. However, despite Tacloban, Philippines having this system, its implementation is not entirely effective. This is why I wanted to create an architecture using the Internet of Things for an application that seeks to improve the contact tracing system of COVID-19 cases in Tacloban City. So my architecture has three main parts. The first one is a proposed QR code registration process. The second is the COVID-19 database. And the third one is the quarantine individuals monitoring. Furthermore, this COVID-19 database will be accessible to the local government unit for contact tracing and to the Department of Health for remote monitoring of quarantined individuals. The proposed architecture, I have compared it to the current one, and I have concluded that it has an edge over the current system as it entails a more secure transmission of data with regards to quarantine individual monitoring, a more legitimate process for QR code registration with the use of national ID, and a more centralized COVID-19 database. This architecture will be useful not only with the case of COVID-19, but also for other communicable diseases that may arise in the future. However, future research is needed for a simulation of the proposed architecture. Proceeding to the content outline, we will start with the introduction, next with the related work, proposed architecture, comparison, and the conclusion. So we have already established that the COVID-19 is an infectious disease and it has affected different sectors. If a person makes physical contact with a person infected with COVID-19, they are also at risk for getting sick from the virus. This is why case investigation and contact tracing is a key strategy for preventing further spread of COVID-19. Moreover, in terms of exploring technological aspects, COVID-19 tracing applications have been seen as an effective resource or system for reducing COVID-19 related total number of infections and mortality rate. The government of Tacloban City has an existing COVID-19 tracing system, which mainly consists of an application and a website for the registration of a quick response QR code, which is scanned for entering an establishment. However, there have been testimonies of lapses of the system, like residents that have been tested positive for COVID-19, but have only visited city-bound establishment for necessities, but they haven't been contacted. Thus, despite implementing the QR code scanning for contact tracing, it is not entirely effective since the existing system is not centralized. Another problem with the existing system is that the only resource for checking the identity of the registrant for the QR code is only their contact number. Why is this a problem? This is because the contact number of Filipinos are not regulated. They can easily buy countless SIM cards and possess different contact numbers, which may result in different QR codes which they can use for different occasions, and the system does not check their name. And then this is why this study proposes a system architecture of an improved and centralized contact tracing system to replace the existing one. This proposed architecture will benefit both the government and the residents by potentially lessening the number of COVID-19 infections and controlling the COVID-19 situation. So for the related work, this is the existing QR code registration website of Tacloban City, and the process is summarized in this flowchart. Allow me to explain this flowchart to you. So the user will first input their personal information, their name, their contact number, and their address. And then the system will check if the user has already registered before by checking the contact number. And if they have already registered before, it will output an error and they'll end the program. But if they have not yet registered before with their contact number, the system will send an OTP or one-time password to the user's contact number, and then the user will input the OTP, and then the system will check if the inputted OTP will match with the sent OTP. And then the system, if it is correct, then the system will produce the QR code, record the data to the COVID-19 database, output the QR code of individual for download, and then end the program. But if the OTP is not correct, it will output an error and end the program. The problem with this is that as established, the user can have multiple QR codes if they have different contact numbers. And also, this has no way in checking if the name they inputted or the address they inputted is correct and legitimate. And moving on to the current quarantine individual monitoring system, it mainly has two ways. The first way is this one. The quarantine individual will record their own body temperature every day, and then they will send these body temperature data to the nurse or health worker that will record and monitor the quarantine individual's health data. And then the second way is that the nurse or health worker will go personally to the quarantine individuals every day to monitor or record their health data. So the problem with the first one is that the patients can easily lie about their body temperature so that they could finish their quarantine period as early as possible. And then the second one puts the nurse or the quarantine individuals at risk for contracting COVID-19. And then moving on to the current COVID-19 database of Tacloban City, as we know that the QR code registration has a problem because it has no resource in checking if the information is legitimate. And then for the next one, the data source for establishments does not provide the time and date of exit in the said establishment, only the entry. And then for the airport authorities, we can see that they still use paper forms in collecting the contact tracing necessary data. So that is a problem because it may lead into inefficiency and the data not being recorded into the database. And then the police and military still record the time and date of entry via land and their origin. And then the hospitals do not input their health information of their patients, which I explain later why that is important. And then this database is used by the local government and contact tracers, and also by the Department of Health for the public disclosure of the number of cases. Now, this is the South Korean COVID-19 database, which I will use as the basis for the proposed database architecture. While it is meticulous and specific, this type of database cannot be implemented directly to Tacloban City due to a lack of reliable and public internet infrastructure. But however, I will use this as the basis for my proposed database architecture. Now, let us move on to the proposed architecture. This is my proposed architecture for the QR code registration. The user will input their scanned national ID. There is no need to input their name, their contact number, and address, since it is already embedded in the national ID. Then the system will check via their national ID number if they have already registered before. If they have already registered before, it will output an error and end the program. And then next, if they have not yet registered before, the system will cross-check with the records of the Philippine Statistics Authority if the ID is legitimate. If it is legitimate, it will produce the QR code, record the data to the COVID-19 database, and then output the QR code of individual for download to use for entering establishment. If it is not legitimate, it will also output an error and end the program. Now, the beauty of this is that the system can now check if the inputted or the name they have is legitimate, the contact number they have is legitimate, and their address. And it is also very possible that they can only have one QR code, since for every national ID they shall only have one QR code. So that is the beauty of this QR code registration process proposed by me. And the next one is the quarantine individual monitoring. In place of the current two ways, the government should provide smartwatches to the quarantine individuals, which will collect the patient's body temperature, blood pressure, and heart rate. And then this data will be uploaded to the app of the quarantine individuals in their smartphone. And then the smartphone will upload this data to the database, in which the database will be remotely monitored by designated healthcare personnel to check if the patient will or will not continue the quarantine after their designated quarantine period. Now, the beauty of this is that this ensures legitimacy and truthfulness of the health data of the patient to really check if they shall continue or not with their quarantine period after their designated one. And then lastly, we have the COVID-19 database. We have already established the new QR code registration, and then it will input the information, personal information of the user to the COVID-19 database. Now for the establishments, we have added the time and date of entry and exit in the said establishment because it is also an important data point. Now for the airport authorities, we will urge them to use the app for collecting the necessary contact tracing information so that it will be a less of a hassle with the paper forms. And then we have also added the data source of maritime authorities since it is also an important data source because there are people coming from the neighboring islands by maritime. So, and the next one, we have also added from hospitals that they will input the health information of their patients to the COVID-19 database, which I will explain later why that is important. Now, the COVID-19 database will be used by the local government unit and the contact tracers for contacting the necessary people who have contacted the positive case and then ordering them to self-quarantine and then test if needed. And then the Department of Health will use this database for remotely monitoring the quarantined individuals and for the public disclosure of number of cases. This time, this is really good because this is real time. Now, proceeding to the comparison of the existing and proposed quarantine individual monitoring. The existing one is done manually, which can lead to patients lying about their body temperature and over wellness just so they can end their quarantine period as soon as possible. And the second way can put the health risk for nurses because they personally check the quarantine individuals, and it also puts the quarantine individuals at risk because the nurses can be carriers of the COVID-19. And then the existing one cannot check if the quarantine individuals enter establishments. So in the proposed one, it is a more secure and faster way for remote monitoring of quarantine individuals, since the health data shall be collected using a smartwatch and shall be uploaded to the COVID-19 database using the individual's app in their smartphone. This proposed architecture will be able to flag quarantine individuals who are about to enter establishments because the data of their quarantine information shall be inputted in their app. And the next one, for the existing QR code registration process, there is no way in verifying if the name or address they inputted is legitimate. It can lead to identity theft and not using their real name. And then the registrants can possess more than one QR code, since people can also have more than one contact number. While in the proposed QR code registration process, it addresses the gap in security since it urges the use of national ID to ensure information legitimacy. And then an individual can only have one QR code since the information to be checked is their national ID number, not their contact number. And then lastly, for the existing COVID-19 database, first, it does not include the maritime authorities as a data source. Second, the data category for establishments does not include the time and exit of the individual out of the establishment. Third, the hospitals do not give current health records for patients. And fourth, the airport authorities collect necessary contact tracing data through paper forms. This can lead to a big possibility of inefficiency and the database not being used effectively. And now the proposed one is a more complete and centralized system. It can better ease in contact tracing since it includes the time of exit out of an establishment, the health records of patients, and the maritime authorities as a data source, and then the airport authorities shall collect necessary data through the app. And then it can also be adapted to become a database for all health records for Tacloban City residents for vaccination, contact tracing, etc. Now for the conclusion, first, the current system for quarantine individual monitoring can be risky, as we have established, because it depends on the patient's truthfulness of their health data, or in the other way, the nurse can be put at risk from personally visiting the quarantined individuals and vice versa. This gap is addressed in the proposed system by incorporating IoT to ease transactions and ensure authentic health data transmitted to the designated health worker for patient monitoring. Second, the current system for QR code registration can possibly lead to an array of problems like identity theft, not using their legitimate phone number or names, and processing more than one QR code. This is addressed in the proposed architecture by urging the use of the national ID for QR code registration. Third, the current database is still not as effective since there is a gap. And there is also still a need to use paper forms. It also lacks necessary data like the individual's time of exit out of an establishment and the lack of coordination from hospitals to send out the health records of their patients. This is resolved in the proposed framework by urging the use of the app for all contact tracing purposes, and it also fills the gap in health records from hospitals, which can be used by the DOH for different purposes, such as easy transactions, effective rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations, and more. Overall, in theory, the proposed architecture has an edge compared to the current system. However, I recognize that a simulation of the system must be implemented to see if it is indeed more effective in mitigating the COVID-19 cases in Tacloban City, which is not part of the scope of this paper as it only tackles the proposed architecture of the contact tracing system. Further research is needed for the simulation of this system, and this proposed architecture can be a basis for future studies with regards to contact tracing and quarantine individual monitoring. That is all from me. Here are my references. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Please give a big hand to our presenter. Okay, that's a very interesting research. So do you have any question to Mr. Kyle about his what is called architecture, QR architecture? No? So then I have a question. I have a very small and maybe stupid question. So do you think this the suggested the system is effective to your city because the base for this QR system, sorry, it's 15 minutes. So base of this, system means that many of your citizen, the people who live in your city using the smartphone, right? So
yes, that is correct.
Yes. So do you think there are, lot of people using the smartphone in your city? Because in my city, yeah, young people, most of people are using the smartphone, but some elderly are not using the smartphone, and they have a kind of difficulty to use that smartphone. So some after we only use the smartphone QR code, then we change to our system to use the call to the call center, something like that, to verify ourselves. So do you think in your city there are enough people for using this QR system?
Actually,
Do you know what
it is
I mean?
all. Yes, it actually in today it's still used the QR code system. Those who do not have smartphones have printed QR codes, which they acquire from the local government in their barangay or in their village. So they use that QR code to go to the groceries if they do not have smartphones. So they have the printed QR codes laminated so that even though they do not have smartphones, they can still enter establishments. Then that is not a problem because it also addresses the gap in the not everyone does not have cell phones. So that is a good one, but the main problem of the QR code registration is that it does not use the national ID and it can lead to information illegitimacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do you have any comments or question? Okay, Professor Randy.
Very good. Good job. You did well in your presentation. I just want to add something to Kyle's presentation, since he is one of my student in this program. One of the reason why we focus on the smartwatch and smartphone is because the cause of this COVID-19 is because of the travelers. And most of the travelers are young people. Elders, they usually stay at home. So if we can protect, example, the travelers and these young people to get an infectious disease, then there's no way for these elders to get this also diseases. So that is why in Kyle's study, the main objective or the main focus are for those people that are moving around in the area. And it is really good, Kyle, because in the future, I would like to suggest not only this, actually, I want to suggest also in the previous presenter, the wind something, the two students who presented in the northern Mindanao, your ideas are really good. Your voice should be heard by our government. And that is one thing that you need to push, because money is not a problem. The problem is the political will of our government through you guys. So you need to push, you need to start to push by educating the people around you that this is our future. If we will not do this, our future will face a lot of problems. So I would like to encourage all of you to push your limits and educate the people around you so that you have forces to bring forth these ideas to our local government and to our national government. I really hope that your ideas are really good, because it really helps our country in the future to move forward and to not to compete, but to be together with the countries that are technological advanced. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you very much.